Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about Chicago from 2002. And this is a winner of the Patreon movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. And this winner was selected by a guy named Crystal. I think Chicago is interesting in a lot of ways. The thing with this movie is it very much is trying to remind you, in a sense, I guess, of what a classic Hollywood musical is, which is why this film is often credited with bringing back the big Hollywood musical, which we still see, not as regularly as the other genres, obviously, but we see them sort of regularly, and the director of this, Rob Marshall, has been responsible for quite a few of them. In a sense, that's a good thing, but it kind of shows a codifying of the genre in a sort of the blandest sense, and I do think this is made by a first-time director who sort of knew how to put on the songs, the music, and things like that, but doesn't really know what he's saying other than I'm making a Chicago movie and not I'm making a satire musical, and that is called Chicago. And I think that kind of runs through it. I do think it's enjoyable, actually. I liked watching it again. I hadn't watched it in a long time. I saw it in theaters. I think I saw it maybe on TV or something. I feel like I've seen it more than once. I might be wrong, but it'd been a while, like 20 years or something since I'd seen it last. And I do enjoy it. I think it actually very much works, but it does feel like somebody who took something that is satirical and means something on the stage. I've never seen it, but you can tell it means something. I've never seen the musical. I've seen the movie, obviously. I've never seen it on Broadway, but you can tell it means something. But you can also tell that Rob Marshall, the director, is not as interested in that in terms of doing like a big show. And I don't know fully the difference between, I'm sure there's people who can compare the two. I'm sure there's some essay or video or something about that. But I think it overall works within its sort of kind of like own ignorance, not fully understanding what to do with the camera sometimes. The editing feels a little sloppier for its time. And its influence kind of has problematic things, particularly when you know who produced it and the power they used from the success of it. But despite all those things, and when you don't get weighted down by it, the film itself is actually enjoyable. So that's neat. It is a fun movie. It's a very fun movie, and I think that's sort of what works about it. I think that's why it got forgiven so much at the time and got to kind of live on, because it has such an energy to it. It's sort of like someone barreling through their subject matter and you're kind of impressed and enjoying it, but you kind of at the end don't feel like it was saying like anything, but it was so splashy and nice and stuff. You kind of are like, yeah, but it was fun. Was that the point? Was it the point that it was fun? And you're not really sure, but you're like, I'm okay with it. I mean, that's sort of like what this movie is. Maybe the Broadway show is also. I don't know, but I say what the movie is. This is obviously about Roxy Hart, who kills her kind of side piece because she believes he's going to get her in a vaudeville act, and he doesn't, so she shoots him, and then she goes to jail and starts sort of a campaign with her lawyer, played by Richard Gere, to get more and more attention, to help her case to hopefully get off. Well, at the time, she's kind of fighting with Velma Kelly, who is the previous big person in the papers, and getting the attention of the big lawyer, played by Richard Gere. They kind of are fighting amongst each other, while mainly the film is about Roxy Hart getting all this new attention and kind of figuring both fame and the legal system out at the same time. Although there's more to it. I don't know if I described that well. So what I do think that this has a lot of great performances which really work. Obviously, the cast of Zeta-Jones and Renee Zellweger are the two you think of first with this film. I think neither of which are great like singers, which is kind of interesting. I know that Bob Fosse wanted to make who wrote the musical, the original musical, wanted to make a movie that he was going to direct. He directed stuff like All That Jazz and a lot of great movies, but he wanted to do one, and it would have been Liza Minnelli as Velma Kelly and Madonna as Roxy Hart, and that's probably one of my favorite unmade movies of all time. I'm like, I can't believe that didn't happen. That sounds amazing. But I do think what Catherine Zeta-Jones and Renee Zellweger do not do in singing, they do in their presence and their star presence. And this is sort of the zenith of them as like kind of both comedic actresses and actresses in general, and they sell everything so well that you don't really I don't actually think about it until like when I was watching my wife and she pointed out, but it's like it is blaringly obvious, but they like sell it so well. I'm like, I remember getting the soundtrack from the library and I was like, I like some of these songs, maybe I like listening to them, and I didn't like listening to the soundtrack. It's like you need all that to like get it to work, which I kind of think is like this whole movie's thing is like I don't think I would really want to watch a scene separated from it, but as a whole it has I think some films have a strange weird alchemy where it's like all of it together sort of works, but if you take a little piece out, it like kind of crumbles, and I think that's sort of what's going on here. But I do think they sell it amazingly well. Catherine Zeta-Jones is really inspired as her supporting performance, which she would win an Oscar for. Renee Zellweger is really, really skinny in this, which is like so different from a Bridget Jones thing, but it shows like how good she is as a comedic actress, how good she is like a star. I think like how neat both of them didn't launch into bigger star roles after this is kind of a mystery to me. I know particularly Renee Zellweger had a beginning of her 2000s very good, but it's crazy to me that like she wasn't in more stuff. But the one I'm really surprised by, and I don't think he got an Oscar nomination, was Richard Gere is like really good in this. Like I was kind of remarkable. I was like, wow, like why do we talk about Richard Gere more? Like he is so good in some of the scenes when he's playing a lawyer and he's doing the tap dance thing, and like he sells it so well. It's just insane. Like he is really the glue of this movie. Like he is the heart of this film. He is the satire of it. Like he gets the satire of Chicago better than this entire movie, and it is really remarkable. I think there are some actors who get the irony in what they're doing, and I think it's like usually Kurt Russell's very good at that in his John Carpenter movies, but the ones that do that at least. But I feel like Richard Gere has that same sort of energy where he can sell it like it's not overbearing, but if you know it, you know it. But at the same time, it's like he has such a showman in him. It absolutely works. He is so good in this. I know he's sort of made a career out of like movies John Travolta turned down, where it's like Days of Heaven, American Gigolo, and this. And although I have not seen American Gigolo as of this time, I should. Both this and Days of Heaven, I think he really, really gets the kind of performance. Like Richard Gere, I think, one thing we don't talk about enough is acting is a form of storytelling. And I think Richard Gere 100% gets that, because in almost everything I see him in, he gets the exact right performance to tell that story. He's almost like, I know people say character actor is the leading man, and they usually mean someone who's like really overdoing it or being a little crazy, but he's like the kind of guy who knows exactly what the movie. He's a very smart, precise actor in a lot of ways. And this, I was like, man, Richard Gere, how did he not get it? He should have, I don't know, definitely snubbed. That's what I think. So it's hard to talk about this movie without bringing one thing up, and I think a lot of people look. This was very much a Miramax movie, very much a Harvey Weinstein movie, and I kind of look at it at the time, because I was into the Oscars and into reading about Hollywood then, is how much emphasis there was on this was like Harvey's baby, and it feels like with Renee Zellweger was very much a kind of Weinstein actress and stuff like that, and it just feels like, and this was also the time where like I think of the best pictures, was this the time when like pretty much every movie had a producing credit or some hand by the Weinsteins in it, like even Lord of the Rings, they get an executive producer credit at the time. Like it was madness, the amount of emphasis that the Weinsteins had then, and this feels like this and The Hours were like the ones that they were like, they didn't have a big auteur who's gonna fight back or something, like they have something like that, especially with Rob Marshall at the time. So it very much feels like within the studio of the Weinsteins. And I know there was like people would fantasize about like, what if this is at the time they didn't know, I hope they didn't know, but anyway, I remember people talking about like, wouldn't it great like if the Weinsteins just talk, like they'll get a backlot and they'll make movies like the old studio era, which I don't know where that rumor started. I heard it a lot at the time, but this kind of goes back to like, they make movies that matter, they make movies that are important, or like things like that. I don't know if like Chicago in this version is like the movie to hang that hat on. I do think they made a lot of movies that are like not as good as people are like. They were such great producers. Think of all the good stuff they made. And I don't, when I bemoan that, I don't mean like Shakespeare in Love and This. I mean things like, was the Iron Lady where Meryl Streep plays Margaret Thatcher or something like there's a lot of those where like they're pretty forgettable Hollywood awards plays, and like have you ever heard, like you never hear them brought up. They like were released, their DVDs are like collecting dust in a landfill somewhere, not being watched. Like they just made a lot of stuff that's like made to win Oscars but not made to really be enjoyed beyond the Oscar year. And I think Chicago was kind of their lightning rod for like people like, look, they made Chicago, they made this long thing, you know, and made it into a hit and an Oscar winner, and it shows like how powerful they were. So it does sort of, to me, and I think anyone who was around at the time, probably less now because, you know, other than the Miramax thing, it reminds me of the Weinsteins quite a bit. That's just something I'll never really not think about it. And the whole time I was like, wow, this is a Weinstein movie, you know. That's always going to be on there for me. The other, you know, I like Queen Latifah a lot, who got Best Supporting Actress and others. I like John C. Reilly a lot as well. And on it, seeing Dominic West, I like that this and the last movie review vote winners have Dominic West in movies you wouldn't think Dominic West is in. It's this and Spice World. I do actually like this movie. I did think, like, even looking at the cinematographer, I was surprised he shot Collateral after this, because I love how Collateral shot. And in this, it's like, I really don't think Rob Marshall knew what he was doing. I really think he was much more concerned on capturing Chicago, but he wasn't. It doesn't feel like he told Chicago. It almost feels like this is like on Broadway they call a pro shot or something like that, and like he was more concerned with directing it like that. But he was able to, you know, he had great actors in this, and it's like he was able to cut enough that you sort of don't notice it sometimes. And it's like, I feel like a lot of people I've read complain about the editing and stuff like this, but I actually think the thing with the editing is he probably cut because he was like, none of this shit works. Let's just like move this around, move it, and keep the momentum going. And like, you know, cutting back to the stage this is like a giant review at the same time was like an interesting idea. But the other thing with this that I do find interesting is everyone at the time, and this does give an aura of, we could go back to a classic Hollywood musical, you know what I mean? And like Chicago, and it's like Chicago, we made a movie of Chicago, and it's like an old classic Hollywood thing. Chicago the musical came out in the 70s. It was never going to be a classic Hollywood movie musical because frankly it didn't exist, and it existed after like The Godfather came out, so it's like definitely missed the boat there. There was a stage play version, and actually there's a really good version which I've reviewed before, believe it or not, called Roxy Hart, starring Ginger Rogers, which apparently Stanley Kubrick really liked. He put it on his like favorite movies of all time when he made a list in the 60s. So that is actually, I think, a really good version. It's much more satirical, and it's probably, I think, the best version of any of this material I've ever seen, to be perfectly honest. This is a very enjoyable, poppy, you know, Oscar-friendly, good for everyone kind of movie. I still like it. I think it's good. It did influence like a lot of garbage, you know, everything from like The Greatest Showman to Mary Poppins Returns, which Rob Marshall directed, to like Into the Woods, to like so many of the movie musicals that came out after were because of the success of this movie. I sort of blame this movie because I'm to be honest, I don't really like many of the big studio musicals. I think a lot of them stink, and they don't have the inventive direction. It feels like a lot of them harken back to classic Hollywood and would say things like Bubsley Berkeley and, you know, and Minnelli and so many of like the big studio musical directors, but will not bring up that like even Bubsley Berkeley had something to say. Turns, all those things, there's still something in there, and I just don't get that from this, and I really just think he was just capturing the musical. I still kind of wish, like, had Bob Fosse directed a movie version of Chicago, sure, like the Madonna one with Liza Minnelli still sounds amazing, but like I think you sort of need an experienced director. I don't know, I forget if Scorsese was involved in this at one point, but like he would have probably been a better choice, or like someone who would have done something new with it. There's interesting ideas, and this overall works, but I think like I do sort of think like it's like you can tell like this is, you know, it sort of worked out, but like barely. There's a lot about this that shouldn't work but does, but like if this comes on and I have to watch again, I will still have a good time. Am I always maybe been a little too critical of this, like, absolutely sure, but I do think it works while you're watching it. But like better minds, and if I'm going to go through it critically, I do think like there's certain elements that could be done better and could be pronounced better and could have been made by much more of a film director, which you can tell Rob Marshall isn't. And then you just become like, you know, a studio approved kind of director guy who makes, you know, things that Disney wants him to make and stuff like that. He's like, yeah, I don't think this is like, it's not that he's not an auteur, but also, you know, to be an auteur, you have to like have a personalized thing to say, and it feels like his personalized thing to say is like, I made the Chicago movie, and like, so what are you saying with it? And he's just still like, I made the Chicago movie, and you're like, oh, okay. All right then. I think this is good. I think it was fun to watch. I enjoy it. I don't love what it influenced. I don't love who produced it. I don't love what they're able to do with the success of it. All of those things. But I'm actually sitting there watching the movie and not reminding myself about Harvey Weinstein or anything, this movie works very well. Sorry. I remember watching this in my first year of film school. I remember people talking about it. Or even talking about like, why are Renee Zellweger's legs so weird? And I'm like, no, I think she's just skinny in the camera angle, and I don't know. I like seeing Maya for a split second. I think she should have been used better. It's the only time I've seen her last name put in anything. I'm from Baltimore, so I like seeing Maya. I think overall, this film, despite of everything, sort of works. It is a little off-putting to see like some of the bad green screen, some of the cinematography isn't great, and even for the time period, it's pretty like under-directed for what you'd expect. And if you think of like there were musicals coming back, but the ones that weren't this one were Dancer in the Dark and Moulin Rouge, and were weird and interesting and strange, and this movie is like none of that. Like, just this movie's not doing that whatsoever. I think it works in its own way. Maybe this is coming off far more negative than my actual experience, because I did enjoy watching it. I enjoyed seeing everyone, do the things before. I enjoyed seeing the musicals. I reminded of that. I liked hearing the songs and stuff like that. I think Bob Fosse makes a great musical, and I think all of the cast together are wonderful together. I think Better Minds, and when you really go through it, it doesn't hold up to that. While you're watching it, it feels like a fun experience, and I think even like as we talk about, even to like Wonka or things like that, you have these like kind of Christmas time big musicals, and a lot of them, I don't think about The Greatest Showman, and like if you really go into that, that's based on the story is a lot worse. But I do think this kind of holds up to a certain degree, because there's this almost feels like let's put on a show. Put on a show and do our best job, and everyone's going to have a good time and stand up and clap and all that wonderful stuff. And does Chicago work on that level? Absolutely. And that's what Broadway shows kind of are ultimately, and that's what they're so great at, and that's what we love about them. And that's what it reminds me of. Does it remind me of what these musicals are saying? Fuck no. But it is good at presenting. You get everyone together with a big theater director, you can make everybody stand and shout and go, that's Broadway and that's Chicago, and I wish it represented more, but who cares, because aren't these songs a lot of fun? Chicago is really good at that. So if you've seen Chicago and you'd like to talk about it, then comment below in the comments and subscribe if you would like to. And this was a winner of the movie review vote. If you would like for me to review a movie of your choice, then click on the link below and pledge, and maybe I'll be reviewing your movie next month. Thank you very much for watching.